I just didn't feel like I really fit in. Because you already kind of don't feel like necessarily you fit in, especially in your younger school years with a disability anyway. But then just being adopted, I kind of didn't really feel like I fit in, because like a lot of my parents' friends were white, but I'm someone who's black. But then at the same time, I didn't quite feel like I fit into the black community either.
I'm Joshua Ung, host of Got Game. I've invited 6 youth with disabilities from across the country to meet me at a board game cafe just outside of Ottawa to talk about our experiences while we play some games.
I've got game because in spite of my visual impairment, I'm always able to see the bigger picture.
First up is Carly Fox, a neurodivergent disability advocate with idiopathic arthritis living in Ottawa.
I got game because I play outside of the rules.
Next is Joe Fornacier, a blind hockey player and TikTok influencer from Burlington, Ontario.
I got game because every piece of adversity that's thrown at me makes me stronger, so I'm pretty much invincible.
Alicia Chenier is a blind motivational speaker, actor, and activist from Sudbury, Ontario, who also lives with a brain tumor.
I've got game because I have the fire and the power to create change and authentically be myself.
Noah Vucsics is a public speaker and Paralympic long jumper in the intellectual disabilities category from Calgary, Alberta.
I got game because of my confidence and perseverance and just being willing to try new things and seek out as many opportunities as I can.
Also from Calgary is Mary Lou Landry, an actor and pageant contestant living with functional neurological disorder and partial hearing loss.
I got game because I am resilient and I always find a way to rise above.
And finally, Ana Vallejo Perez, a Kelowna, BC-based creative writer and musician who uses a wheelchair due to brittle bone disease.
I got game because I want to do everything and I will try to do everything.
Today, we're playing the True or False trivia game, Is That True? Guess the right answer and win the card. Get it wrong and the questioner keeps the card. This is Got Game.
All right, Noah, you were in Paris last year, so maybe you know this. It took exactly 8 months to build the Eiffel Tower. True or false?
False.
False? Are you sure?
Sure.
Yeah, you're right. Took 2 years, 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, he knew his stuff, he knew his stuff. Good traveler.
You knew your Paris knowledge.
Alicia.
Ooh, okay. What am I gonna ask? Carly. Yes. Okay, we only use 10% of our brains.
Not true.
True or false? False.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
It's
like debunked. It's been debunked so many
Evidence
times.
show that we use 100% of our brains every day.
Yeah.
Oh.
Really, eh?
Noah, can you tell us about your disability?
Yeah, so an intellectual disability is someone's lack of ability to understand and process information in either some areas of life or all areas of life. And the reason why I say some areas of life or all areas of life is it can kind of range on a spectrum from mild to moderate to severe. Because the confusing thing with intellectual disability is you might see everyone on paper and be like, wow, they all have lower IQs, so they're probably just all gonna be the same. But now teachers and ed assistants are realizing that these 10 people might all look the same on paper, but could all function very differently in life. So for myself, I have more of a mild intellectual disability that kind of mainly affected me more on the academic side. So like reading, writing, math, English. I was in a special education program from grade 4 right up into grade 12. But sometimes I get asked questions like, well, Noah, what is your intellectual disability? And when people ask me this, they're applying like, do you have Down syndrome or do you have autism? But I always tell them, well, I don't have Down syndrome or I don't have autism. I'm just someone with a mild intellectual disability and my brain struggles to process some information on day-to-day life things. For myself, mine always showed up more primarily in the classroom. So from kindergarten to grade 3, I was actually in, I guess, the regular classes, but then just finishing grade 3, that's when teachers had to say to my parents, look, Carolyn and Rob, we're noticing that Noah's just not able to learn at the same rate as everybody else in the classroom, and meaning his reading and writing and everything else academic is just lower. And so he's gonna need to go, well, first he's gonna need to go in and get a diagnosis because we think he might have something going on. And so that's what we did. We went in, got the diagnosis, and it showed that my IQ was slightly lower and that I have an intellectual disability. And then I needed to be in a special education program because my whole academic learning was just a little bit slower and a little bit lower than my typical peers.
Does anyone else have a question for Carly?
No, I mean, like, the obvious question, how did you get into long jump?
Yeah, okay, so my journey to track, It was an interesting one because growing up, I actually hated sports. But it really wasn't until, I guess, yeah, in grade 12, I was just jumping over tables and garbage cans, which I shouldn't have been doing. You know, I did get in trouble for that too. So I've always been a jumpy kid, and then teachers are like, okay, no, you can't jump over tables and garbage cans. But it was March, and they're like, but track is coming, right? So why don't you just try it and see if you like it? And so my dad buys me these distance running pairs of spikes, which worked at the time, and I signed up for a meet, and I think I had a 20-foot jump, or a jump of 6 meters 25 at the time, and got a bronze medal at city championship. And I'm like, you know what? I could be maybe actually good at this. And once I found out about this potential class in the Paralympics that I could be eligible for, we just made it my mission to try and do everything I could to pursue the next steps on getting there.
Although not a student, Noah currently trains with the varsity track team at the University of Calgary.
Long jump, high jump, double.
I don't know about that. Oh, we're gonna have Reagan running 200.
Make your own hurdles.
And a 4x4. Oh.
Today, they need to first prepare the long jump pit by breaking up and raking the sand.
Return to run includes opening the pit.
Back in 2018, however, Noah's first step was getting his Paralympic classification.
The jogging and the walking.
Basically being classified is having the Paralympic committee see that you actually have a disability, because they can't obviously just take my word for it. So, and interestingly, I had to go all the way to Dubai twice, because the intellectual impairment panel doesn't actually come to Canada or the American region. So I had to go to Dubai, prove to them that I had an intellectual disability. That's all basically measured through IQ. And then from there, I could start pursuing the Paralympic team.
With the long jump pit ready, the team moves on to warm up. It was back in 2022 when Noah first approached the team's coaches, hoping they could get him ready for the Paralympics in just 2 years. Coach Jane Kolodnicki was originally skeptical.
Yeah. So we hit the sweet spot. You know, at first I thought, well, you know, maybe 2028. But right off the bat, in his first year with us, he had his breakout performance at the World Championships. And from that moment on, James and I just kind of looked at each other and said, okay, here we go. This is the real deal. And so he has all of those qualities in one package, right? He is hardworking, and he's got natural talent, and he's got determination, and he's coachable, and he's positive, and it just all comes together. And at just the right time.
Yeah. Paris 2023 as well, I competed at my first World Championship where I did get a silver medal, and that opened up a qualifying slot for the Paralympic Games, and then made it to Paris 2024.
At the Paralympics, Noah competed in the T20 intellectual disability category for long jump and placed 5th.
So for myself as an athlete in the Paralympics, some people ask me, oh, well, are you jumping with someone with a prosthetic leg? But obviously, I just compete with athletes only with intellectual disabilities, and so that's what the T20 is.
Okay. Let's pop up, but super light. When we're hitting down towards the ground, we're still putting a lot of emphasis on the down part, not the up part.
Yeah, giddy up. There's 18 different classes. Paris 2024 was just competitive as a whole in every class, regardless of if you were a wheelchair racer or if you were an ambulatory athlete that had 2 legs and can run. It was competitive for everyone.
Perfect.
With the team all warmed up, it's time to practice some jumping drills. Noah's success in the sport is not surprising for his mom, Carolyn Vucsics.
He loved to jump as soon as he was able to do it. When we put him in an exerciser, he was like a little jumping bean. He just jumped and jumped and jumped. So it was always in his genes.
Excellent.
Go, Noah.
I'm feeling great about 2028. I think 2024 was an opportunity for him to really see that big stage of the Paralympics, and for myself as well. Okay, we're getting off the ground really well, Noah. Okay, got one more? Okay, one more attempt. And so now that we've got that under our belts, we know what to expect, and we'll set it up with a series of competitions over the next 3 years and have him ready for the big day.
There we go.
Nice work. That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was your best attempt.
Right now I'm 24. You know, jumpers peak around 28 to 30 range. I mean, everyone who medaled in the Paralympics this year was in between 26 and 33, actually. So I see possible 1 more games in me. I think, you know, I'll be 28 in LA 2028. And if I work hard at it, that's kind of in my prime as a jumper, so I see no reason why I can't pursue Los Angeles. And I think just being outdoors, it changes the perspective a little bit in the oval.
Good.
Yeah, I know you mentioned T20. Could you go into the classification process?
Getting classified is pretty complicated, but why you need to be classified, or in other words, prove to the Paralympic Committee that you have a disability, is there's less likely to be cheating going on. Because in year 2000, the intellectual impairment sport class got removed from the Paralympic Games because there was a whole basketball team that all faked having intellectual disability.
Oh my God. Wow.
Right? And the reason why they faked having intellectual disability is because they weren't, I don't know how exactly they were classifying, but not as stringent as they are now.
That's crazy about the people faking a
Whole basketball.
All of them. It's sick.
Got Game will return after the break. Got Game is back.
Joe.
Oh. Actually, I'm fired up, man. I'm due. I've got a card for a long time. I'm due.
Greece has the lowest divorce rate in the EU. True or false?
What a specific question. Huh.
It can only be from the EU.
Giannis. Giannis is married to his wife. I want to say. He's a Greek guy.
Greek guy.
He's an NBA player.
Let me. Oh my gosh, bro! I feel like that's so weird that it's gotta be true, but it also could be false. So.
Okay, but ready?
No, you're right. You know what? I respect all the Greeks. I love them. They're nice people. Give me true.
Are you sure that is your final answer?
Divorcing?
No, it's that they have the lowest.
Sorry, I'm waking up.
Oh, I thought it was high.
That's your final answer?
My final answer. Nah, it's false. It's false. It's false. That's my final answer. Give me that. What a save. What a save.
What a question to cover.
Okay, Noah. The world record in men's long jump has been the same since 1968. True or false?
I feel like I should know this. No, I'm gonna say that's false.
Yeah, that's false. It was beaten by Mike Powell in 1991.
That's right.
I was about to say, that's a crazy record to stand if it's from the 60s. Before we pick up with the game, though, I want to ask a little bit of a potentially taboo question. Noah, what are your feelings towards the R word and people's use of it?
Junior high or middle school, a lot of the classmates in the regular classes would always call my class the retarded class. Oh, you're in the PACE learning program. You guys don't learn that well. That's just where the kind of retarded class people learn. And obviously, I mean, it didn't really make me feel great, I guess, obviously. But I guess back then, like at that point in junior high, I wasn't really comfortable even embracing my disability or talking about it or seeking opportunities. So I just felt like there really wasn't anything I could do about it, even though some of my classmates or people in my school were using that term, I guess.
Can I chime in on that?
Yeah, of course.
Growing up, because you and me have talked about how I have a brother who has an intellectual disability as well as autism, and it was a word, like I was never really called that word, but there were often times, like especially me and my brother, we went to the same high school, and while my brother was in the special needs class, he had peers that would get called that by people outside of his classroom, and like being in disability studies as well, it's one of those words that like is just not something that we should be using and we should move away from because of just how, historically how it was used. And so I always stood up for my brother. Like my brother was never called that thing, thankfully, but others in his class were. And I'm like, you guys don't understand like what intellectual disability is and what autism is. And they're just like everyone else,
I'm just curious, could you elaborate on why within disability studies, they're now teaching people to refrain from using it and try and encourage different forms of language instead of it?
Yeah, historically, the way the R word was used and how it was coined is just not something that is accepted. It's kind of like the word Asperger's. We don't use that anymore because of where it came from, and it came from Nazi Germany. And so, having that background knowledge of like, where did these words come from? Why were they intentionally used? And how can we change the narrative and change those words, right?
Yeah, I can expand on the history a bit if that would be
Yes.
helpful. A lot of the work I do is around disability rights, and obviously, like, disability rights are for all disabilities. So while I don't have an intellectual disability myself, like, people with intellectual disabilities have been targeted the most through something called institutionalization when you are removed from the community. And then forced against your will, often in things like long-term care homes where there is very little, surveillance. And we've seen a lot of abuse, and there's actually unmarked graves on a lot of these now closed institutions. And we're still working on closing institutions because they've changed their shape over time. But it was 2009 when the Aurelia institution closed, and that's around Toronto. Yeah. And they found, I think, like 300 unmarked graves. And that's just kind of the history, because that word was used to categorize people, strip them of their rights, and then remove them from society. So I think that's why the word, for me, is just something we should never use unless it is in that reclaiming sense.
Well, and I feel like too, even in the Calgary Board of Education with teachers, like I remember when I did go into the PACE learning program in grade 4, I did have a classmate who had Asperger's, and the teacher all the time, yeah, well, he has Asperger's, so he's different, or she'd get a substitute in. Yeah, he has Asperger's, so he's might learn differently from that, and just using the word just so freely, I guess. So even, I'm sure there's a lot of education that can be done on the teacher side as well too.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing about the Nazi Germany thing. Like I had no idea. Like, so there's definitely not enough coverage on that to kind of spread awareness on.
And also, like, I don't blame people for not knowing. There's not a lot of resources. I learned through a podcast, Invisible Institutions, which was really educational for me and like kind of opened my eyes. There was so much I didn't know, so.
Got Game will return after the break. Got Game is back.
Alicia.
Ready.
Okay, since you also have a hard time in planes, this is a plain one.
Cool.
Commercial long-haul aircraft dump toilet waste when flying over oceans.
Oh.
Is that true or is that false?
That's nasty. Is that an option? Nasty.
It is nasty.
Oh, like just like regular airplanes?
Yeah, so it's like aircraft. It's like the ones that are like
no, I'm gonna say false because imagine being on a cruise and that's just like I'm gonna say false.
It is false.
Okay.
I was like, I believed that for like a while. Like when I was like younger, I believed that.
Okay. Who hasn't gotten a question yet? I'll go Mary Lou. All right. In Tokyo, you can buy ice cream with beef tongue, horse meat, and squid ink flavors.
Oh my gosh.
True or false? I don't even know what it says on the back.
Ice cream.
We're gonna find out together.
Honestly,
I think it's false.
yeah, it's gotta be false.
It's gotta be false, right?
Is it?
Let's see.
Is that your final answer?
It is. It is. Let's see.
Nope, I knew the answer. You got finessed. It's true. Give
That was clean.
me that card.
First bit of reverse psychology.
There we go.
We need a true, false, or nasty option.
Okay, before we continue with the game, I want to ask Noah something. Okay. So Noah, you were adopted by your parents in Canada. Can you tell us about you seeking a balance from your identity from your biological parents and your black side versus, growing up in a white household in Calgary?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think for me, being adopted, I guess in like my younger years, I was kind of, I guess, a little mixed up in a sense. Being mixed up with a disability is one thing, so I was already mixed up with that. But then also just having white parents, sometimes I would be like a little bit mixed up because I would go into a coffee shop and people would be staring and I just couldn't figure out why they're staring. And now that I think, because I'm older, I have a different perspective. Like if people are looking, I know they're, for the most part, just curious. But back in my younger years, like grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, I didn't really know that. Even one time we were in Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, or in that range in the States on a holiday once, and we were at this theme park, and myself, my sister, and my two obviously white parents, and these two black girls are walking by, and they were just giving us like the dirtiest look. Like you could just tell they were not happy that white parents had adopted kids from Haiti. And then when other people who I knew would tell me stuff like, well, do you feel like your biological mom was wrong in terms of giving you up? And maybe when I was younger I might have agreed with them on that subject, but it's a little bit different like being an adult. And I've never been back to Haiti, but I did get to go to the Dominican Republic last year in November, so which is like same island as Haiti, so I got to still see a pretty close perspective. And I ultimately know that my biological mom, so we don't know a lot about her, but we know she was 18 when she had me, and we know that her first name was Ali Najan. And I know that she gave me up because she really wanted to give me the best chance at life. Like, there was just no possible way that she could have looked after me in Haiti. But I think coming to terms with that really, really took a long time, and it really probably wasn't until grade 11 to maybe even just graduating high school where I really came more at peace with that or comfortable with that. But I think being mixed up as a child, because I was adopted, was definitely a thing. And then on top of that, having my disability. So I just didn't feel like I really fit in. Because you already kind of don't feel like necessarily you fit in, especially in your younger school years with a disability anyway. But then just being adopted, I kind of didn't really feel like I fit in because like a lot of my parents' friends were white, so I was kind of surrounded by this white community, but I'm someone who's black. But then at the same time, I didn't quite feel like I fit into the black community either. So it just took a while for me to just come to my identity and just be confident, I guess, with who I am. But it just took many, many, many years to kind of get to that point, if that kind of made sense.
What was the best thing that happened to you in Chula Vista?
The best thing that happened to me?
Noah's catching up with his parents over coffee after a recent training trip to California. His mom, Carolyn, and dad, Rob, adopted both of their children from Haiti, 2 years apart.
We got married a little bit older. We had trouble conceiving, so we decided that we would try and adopt. And we tried locally for a year, and then that didn't work out, and we decided to go to Haiti. So we adopted our daughter in 1998, and we adopted Noah in the year 2000. And he was 5.5 months old at the time.
Me and my sister, for the most part, we just got along great as kids, and we still get along now as adults. And me and my parents now have a pretty good relationship, and they're supportive of me and my track and the things I'm doing. I mean, they were the ones who even actually convinced me to really do track. So they've always been there to support me on whatever kind of path I'm doing.
Although it took Noah a long time to accept his various identities, things started to change in high school.
It's like a switch just changed going into grade 10, where it's like, I have a disability, I can't change that, but let's just do as much as I can and get involved. Because that's when I just started to, you know what? It's time to just embrace my disability. Obviously, I know I'm not going to be doing the regular math like everybody else, but that doesn't mean I can't do drama, or that doesn't mean I can't partake in leadership or do any of those cool things. And because I was just so involved throughout my 3 years of high school, that's kind of what led me to be the valedictorian for my graduation class.
Reflecting on his time leading up to his high school graduation, Noah heads out to one of his favorite spots, the backyard trampoline.
Ultimately, actually, with the valedictorian, I didn't even want to do it at first, but with the support of my mom helping me, and then one of my friends in the PACE learning program as well said to me, you know, Noah, like, we're not going to graduate with the regular kids. So he said to me, I don't really feel like I deserve to walk the stage. And when he said that, that kind of motivated me to be like, okay, you know what, if I do work hard and I do become the valedictorian, and he sees me delivering a speech in front of the whole school, and he can be like, well, Noah has the same disability that I do. I'm like, well, hopefully that inspires him to feel like he does deserve to walk the stage. So really just doing those things throughout school and getting involved, that's what helped me just embrace more of my disability and be like, I do belong here and I do belong in this community.
Do you guys want to get back into the game?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Carly.
My question is for Anna. A blind person has nightmares 4 times more often than a person with vision on average.
Oh my.
I feel like that's false. Like, I like, what does blindness have to do with nightmares?
Yeah.
I guess someone that has like horrible nightmares. I mean, okay, my final answer is false.
It's true.
Is it true?
Wait,
Oh my God.
What the fuck?
How did you measure that?
Okay, so scientists believe it's because blind people experience, sorry guys, more threatening situations in their everyday life.
Okay, I feel like.
Sorry.
The fact you were like
Sorry,
that
guys.
heads up, it's like.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't get nightmares that often to be like
Flex on
other
that.
people, but like I'm saying like other people only get it a quarter of the time. That's so little.
Got Game will return after the break. Got Game is back.
Mary Lou,
Yeah.
a study shows that 1/3 of vegetarians have eaten meat when they're drunk. True or false?
Oh, true.
True?
Definitely.
That confident.
Yeah, I was that in that 1/3 when I was.
Oh, okay. Well, you are right. It is true.
Yeah, I was.
I love that.
That's so funny.
Okay, who am I gonna ask? Joe. Okay, in France, passing a priest brings good luck.
I feel like in Italy I would say true. Now I kind of want to say false because it's France, but also France, Italy, close kind of maybe. You know what? We're going true. Final answer true.
Okay, it's actually false. It brings bad luck.
Oh my.
Oh wait, that's crazy.
Say hi to the priest, shouldn't you like I don't know, you're just going past.
Bad luck is actually crazy.
It brings bad luck. You can't pass the priest. What
Yeah.
do they do then?
It's like a black.
They all
What do
just,
you
like-
do? What do you do like to not do that? Like you just like walk the other way.
Carly, I know that a question that you had generally was to the table was about imposter syndrome. I was wondering if you could share that right now.
No, so I feel like a lot of disabled people deal with imposter syndrome because, like, obviously non-disabled people have it too, and they feel like they're not supposed to be in a place that they're not qualified. And I feel like disabled people feel that so much more because society's telling us we're not qualified, we're not supposed to be there. It's not just a feeling, it's what we've been told. So, you know, have you guys felt that? And if so, how have you coped with it?
It's so easy to be stuck in your head and not look at the other stuff. Like with my acting program, I was like, did I just get in for accessibility since I'm the first? And one of my close friends was like, I don't think it's just for that. So that line was stuck in my head, but then I realized I was like, it's actually a liability to have me here in that class when it's not accessible. That why they would, when there's 40 people auditioning, they take 24, why would they give themselves that struggle if I didn't deserve it? But I feel like it all goes with like a change of mindset because often it's way easier to just look on yourself and be stressed out and cut yourself opportunities because it's so hard to like be like, okay, I can do this.
I also feel like being in the like content space is like really the only disabled hockey creator that's at my level. I'm like at influencer events with all able-bodied people, and I know for a fact like this isn't just me in my head. Like people are saying like he's just there because he's blind, and the only reason he popped off is because he's this blind guy, and it's like that's just who I am. You know what I mean? Like, and for a while I'm like, man, like, you know what? Maybe if I was never visually impaired, I would never have this success. And then I'm like, you know what? Like, if I was sighted, I'd be doing something completely different and still be successful in that field. So I think regardless of what situation I'm in, I'm gonna make it work. And that's kind of the mindset that I have now. And it's kind of nice to, again, have these conversations because I don't think about it like too much, but when I really do like kind of narrow it down, it's like, this is something I kind of need to have this internal conversation with myself, with my peers about. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Speaking of having these conversations, Anna, what about you?
Imposter syndrome is my life. But I just want to say that like I relate to like, yeah, like I feel like I have imposter syndrome in like any kind of success that I have. In this show, coming here, whenever like any of my stuff gets in like film festivals or anything, like I always feel like, oh, like these people kind of know me, maybe it's like this or all of that. But I actually wanted to go on another route on this imposter syndrome thing because I feel like a lot of the times, a little bit on the more darker side, I guess, but a lot of times I get this kind of imposter syndrome, I believe. For example, when I need certain treatments for my stuff, from like chronic pain, from the kind of, like even like going to the hospital, like a lot of the times I just like, I feel like, oh, is this bad enough? Like, I am used to having pain, so like, is this even a level 4? Or is this just like, have I made it up? Like, this isn't just like, oh, I bumped my arm or anything. Like, I've been in pain for weeks and weeks, and I'm not going to the doctor because no one's taking me seriously. And I don't take myself seriously.
Carly, given that it was your question in the first place, I'm curious, is imposter syndrome something you've dealt with?
So I think in two ways, like being invisibly disabled, like you said, sometimes I feel like too disabled for non-disabled people, but not disabled enough, especially as a public speaker. I'm like, am I allowed to take up this space? So definitely like using my space, I think we have a responsibility to do that, to make space for others. But I also coined reverse imposter syndrome, which is so funny and such a life hack, because I've never seen anyone actually be called out as an imposter. And I realized that when everyone thinks that they don't belong, like they're also focused on themselves. They don't care if you're qualified or not. So now I have this attitude of like, okay, what are you gonna do? Kick me out? Absolutely. And I've said this, I forget where I said it, but you know, just make it work for you, because no one's ever gonna tell you like, well, they will, but like no one's ever gonna kick you out of a building being like, you don't deserve to be here. And everyone's so in their head. So, you know, like if you have an opportunity, like take it. You know, if no one's gonna stop you, why stop yourself?
The worst that they can do is say no. You know, to an opportunity,
I think on a personal level, I think that I've experienced it in a couple different ways. I think disability being one of them, but also being someone of mixed race is also another way I've experienced it, just because I'm from a pretty like rural white area, and my mom's white, but my dad is Indian and Chinese. And when I finally kind of moved out of that area and started interacting more with, you know, people of color, it kind of became like evident in a lot of ways that, oh, like I'm not white, but I'm not like brown enough to be brown or Asian enough to be Asian, and kind of led to these feelings of like insecurity about my own race, which is a weird position to be in, because I think that was something that, you know, I worked on over time and I'm more comfortable with now. I love being mixed and having those different cultural aspects in my background, but it's definitely something that I've still worked on in some ways. And then, no, I'm glad that you and I can relate in some sort of way about potentially not feeling as if, you know, we are good enough for our own people.
Got Game will return after the break. Got Game is back.
Okay. Carly, I feel like you
I could go for 3.
You'll get this. In most parts of Japan, you should stand on the left when riding an escalator.
I have no idea. No, I feel like they'd be on the right.
Are you sure that's your
Let's go for it. It's 50-50, right?
That's
Yep.
it's true.
I'll trust you on that. I'm sorry to Japan.
I just feel like, wait, I don't get a brain fart.
Mary Lou.
Okay, Anna.
Okay.
You need a card, so, okay. Gorillas stick out their tongues to show happiness.
Wait, sorry, what?
Gorillas stick out their tongues to show happiness.
True.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm so absolutely sure.
No, it's false.
Wow. I wasn't sure either. I let him both.
I thought
Pleasure.
I did.
Oh, really? I thought
When they're not happy, they're showing their tongue. That's what it says.
I guess so.
Absolutely, I was like, okay, she got it right then.
I
Yeah.
need to avoid every gorilla sticking out a tongue now. It means they're angry.
Ooh, you put cinnamon? Really?
I love cinnamon.
In peppermint tea, eh?
Yep. I
Really?
put cinnamon in everything. Cinnamon and nutmeg, actually.
Okay.
Today, Noah's meeting one of his best friends, Sierra Sweeney, at a coffee shop. Sierra is a University of Calgary master's student who also competes in track.
Let's do it. Do it.
Honestly, the first time I met Noah, I had no idea what to expect. You know, people told me he had an intellectual disability. Did I really know what that meant? No. You know, I tutor, and I actually tutor a few kids with autism and stuff. First time I met him, I was like, disability? What disability are they talking about? Because, you know, he's such a great talker, such a great person, and, you know, honestly, I can't tell.
Unlike Sierra, who's currently doing a research study using her kinesiology background, Noah's intellectual disability makes the possibility of university a real challenge for him.
Yeah, so why don't you tell me the projects they're working on?
Yeah, sure. So why don't I take this out and I'll show you our poster first.
Yeah. A lot of people have said, well, what's wrong with you? Or, you know, you don't obviously look like you have a disability like my child does. Because I function very unusual with being so social for someone with an intellectual disability, where obviously with some others you would be able to tell just if they were to speak, right? So it's just, I just have to just get good at just explaining to them, like, I do have an intellectual disability. I know you might not be able to see it. Because, you know, one of the things for me, like, that's quite evident that shows up are the questions I get about university quite often, right? But university was just never really in the cards for me, because with my intellectual disability, I wouldn't be able to function in a university setting and hand in multiple essays at a time. My brain just couldn't function or keep up at that pace. But that's not a thing people can just see by looking at me. I remember last year, I think it was someone on the Paralympic team was like, oh, things just must be easier for like the athletes that can walk or who are partially blind or who have intellectual disabilities. And I'm like, well, not really. Like I said to him, like, look, man, like I know I look very high functioning and stuff, which I am, but you know, I know you're in a wheelchair, but you can go to university. I can't go to university, right? Now that's not something, I don't think he knew that quite at the time, but it's just kind of, those are some of the challenges that I kind of had to face kind of when I first kind of got started on the Paralympic team, is people just couldn't quite see what was wrong with me. And I'm like, I do have my challenges, you just have to ask me about them.
Skeleton, we call it, on the camera screen just to see how you're moving
Oh,
and stuff
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
And maybe a little bit more common on the invisible disability side, but there was still for many years where I thought, even though I knew I was in a special education program and in school and struggled with learning, but lots of other people didn't see that, right? Like on Sundays, you know, when I go to church, it's not like my church community actually sees me in school, but because I still function very high socially, and then I tell them I have this disability, like they'll look at me, well, are you sure? Or wait, what, you can't go to university? Like, well, why, what's wrong with you? Like, why can't you? It was almost like an internal battle with myself where it just took a while. Like, it's like I had one foot in the disability community, but then like one foot out of it because, you know, because my intellectual disability is mild, it's, I guess, given me some advantages to, you know, just blend in, I guess, and be in communities and, you know, people wouldn't see that there's anything wrong with me. But then when we start talking about things like, well, are you in school? And then I bring up, well, I'm not in school. Well, why not? Well, and then I go into my struggles. Well, you're talking fine, so I don't think you have those struggles. And people have said that to me. So it can kind of, what we were just talking about, kind of relate almost on the disability side as well, too.
Anna, for you, like growing up with a physical disability like all your life, like how was it the experience growing up and understanding that like you're like, you know, we're all different, but you know what I mean? Like your peers may not have looked like you. How was it the experience growing up like in school and everything like that?
I feel like I always felt different. Like I always just felt different. But I always felt like, oh, I hope they don't really see me get on my wheelchair. That's how I felt. I hope they don't really see it and get to know me before they see the wheelchair. That's how I always felt. And I still almost feel like that. Like I always feel like, okay, I hope they get to know me before they really get to know about my disability.
Now that like you're in university and you have your own life, how is that going with that mindset of like being scared people would see you for your disability and not for you?
I feel like I try to ignore like people staring. People stare a lot, right? Like now I try to just ignore that. I try to like don't even like look other ways. Just don't like even look for people that are looking at me and just go about my life. I'm totally fine with people asking questions about my disability. I actually really like that. Or only when I know that they actually want to get to know me.
And they often, for me, like, you know, you're in public, you lock eyes with someone and they're like grinning at you because they want to ask you something. And like so many times it's like the most ruthless questions, like, how did you become disabled? And it's like, that is not something that you should just ask a stranger. So have you ever experienced that? Like, you know, like I've just started giving ridiculous answers.
Like how have I ever like each week, like,
like every other,
like every other outing, like an old man just walking past, like looked past me and was like, "I'm so glad I never got anything," and I was like,
"Not yet." It gives the same vibes as I was at a bus stop and I was just waiting, and this like older man it comes up. And he looks at me, he's like, "You're blind, right?" I'm like, "Yes." And he like looked me right up and like came down. And then he said, "I would kill myself if I ever went blind." And I was like, what are you supposed to say to that? Like, I'm just trying to go to Walmart.
Yeah.
I think we should get back to the game.
Okay. Who to ask? Joe. Wait, did I ask you last time? I don't remember. Okay.
I don't know. I don't even.
Give him the card.
I'm gonna.
Take the lead over these peasants.
I want a card really badly. Okay. Now that you said that, I'm gonna ask you the harder question.
Oh wow.
Okay. Modern soil is so sterile that there are only 50 bacteria cells per gram of soil. What is your answer?
Yeah, we might need to reread that 7 times.
Modern soil.
Mother soil?
Modern. Modern soil is so sterile that there are only 50 bacterial cells per gram of soil. I didn't know there was antique like soil, old soil. I don't even know.
Modern soil? Are they like
Yeah,
manufacturing dirt? Like how can you just be modern? Let me think. Okay, I'm not even gonna think too much. No matter how hard I think, I'm never gonna know this. I'm gonna say, well, 50 bacteria per gram. That's still a decent amount of back, right? It's a lot of back. Give me true. Give me true on that. It's a lot of back. It's enough back.
Okay.
It's enough back. It's enough back.
Yeah. No, it's false. Okay, there are 50 million bacteria cells per gram of soil in modern soil. How much in antique soil? Like, okay, I'm keeping this one. Thank you.
No one else thought sterile.
Wow, I'm sick.
I like how she played you on that.
Got Game will return after the break. Got Game is back.
All right, it's my turn. Who do I want to pick? I don't know. Who's got the least cards?
I don't have any.
Stop singling people out.
I feel like you're lying.
I haven't been asked anything.
He's lying.
All right, you know what?
Yeah.
Josh wants to be asked something. Kind of makes me want to not ask him something.
Great.
But I will though. All right, Josh.
All right.
Can the shape of pasta be patented?
What?
Like pasta shapes be patented, like rigatoni, both.
Yeah, there's the Italian coming out. Holy smokes.
Can it be? Can it be patented? Think about it.
What do you mean?
Think about
Why
it.
do you say think about it?
I just, it seems ridiculous, so no. I'm gonna say no, it's false.
You would be wrong for that.
What the fuck? Actually?
It is true. The shape of pasta can be patented.
But like, I just want to hear you say more pasta names.
Yeah, just go through a whole list of them. So what, were people who made like spaghetti just slow to get a patent then?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so.
Noah, you kind of mentioned before about sponsorships.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to like explain that for people who may not know, like not this. I don't want to like use the word struggle, but like how that kind of has biases in it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, well, sponsorships on the Olympic program are already hard enough, so just imagine on the Paralympic program with disabilities, it's actually almost like 10 times harder. And like, I'll soon be the third person on the Paralympic program to be sponsored, but I would like that number to be bigger because there's so many athletes on the Paralympic program with great stories, but it's just getting to a point to get your story together and then being able to tell it.
Well, I feel like we should start out with like a warm-up.
So warm up, yeah. Oh, look, it's
As Noah and his friend Sierra hit the weight room, he knows that a huge part of finding sponsorships was his recent experience in public speaking.
I think early 2024, I wanted to start doing things, not necessarily just track and field, right? So I was just so focused over the years of just track, but I'm like, wow, like I have this great story. I think it could inspire the people. And so I just started seeking out these little opportunities and just continued to do that. And a part of me loves public speaking. Like not every athlete likes to do that and share their story and stuff like that. But it's really helped me in terms of, approaching companies. Like I had the confidence to do that because I had done so much public speaking for the last 7 months to schools.
In the future, Noah hopes to help more Paralympic athletes find sponsorships.
I mean, ultimately, I'd love to work in like an athlete services engagement kind of role at some point, either that's with the Canadian Paralympic Committee or the Olympic Committee, because there's so many athletes out there who have these great stories, but they just don't quite know how to tell it. So I could definitely see myself being in that kind of route and keep promoting and inspiring that next generation, especially even like within Paralympics and T20 in Canada. I'm the only long jumper, and I know that number could be a lot bigger when more people are just aware of the class and then have the right system and support to, get noticed by Athletics Canada, get on the national team.
Well, what should we do?
Put it back and get some stretching, probably.
Yeah, should cool down.
For now, Noah will continue to train hard for the 2028 Los Angeles Paralympics, bringing his positive outlook to Sierra and the rest of his training partners.
We could be in the middle of one of the toughest workouts, and he's there. Like the other day, we were running, and he's belting out songs from the Polar Express. Like, who can do that in the middle of a hard running workout, right? But he just makes the group feel good, you know, even at practice.
I personally like to look more to the positives of things in life rather than kind of the negative. I mean, there's always going to be negatives, of course, but you know, I just feel it's better to live optimistic and happy and just be willing to work hard rather than living negative. So I think that's just kind of just naturally just one of the gifts that I have is just being positive. I think this is going to be a good year.
Do you guys want to pick back up with the game?
Hell yeah. Anna, if you dug a hole through the earth, assuming you can do that, starting in New Zealand, you would end up in Spain. True or false?
The world.
I thought you always end up in China. I thought it's digging a hole to China.
Well,
This information's crazy.
You dig a hole through Taiwan, you still end up in China.
The whole 3D world.
Trying so hard.
Remember Phineas?
I'll say it's true.
Yeah, you're right.
Damn.
Whoa!
Let's go geography.
Geography. Damn. I didn't expect to be right.
Bruh, I need a card, so I hope whoever gets this gets it wrong. I'm not gonna lie. Alicia.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Up until 1945, it was technically legal to mail a child in the US. True or false?
Excuse me.
Think about it, think about it.
I'm just gonna say true.
True?
Yeah.
Final answer.
Yeah.
It's false.
Oh,
Oh, thank God.
Holy smokes! Yeah.
It was just so weird. It couldn't-
1995 is not medieval times.
I don't
Can't
know,
mail people
man.
around.
Actually, well, I want to say thank you to everyone at the table for your contributions this episode. Noah, it's been so great getting to know you. And that is Got Game.
Producer Tim Alp. Associate producer and host Joshua Ung. Created by Joshua Ung through AMI's apprenticeship program. Written and story edited by Maureen Carter. Director of photography Benjamin Dion. Editors Caitlin Martell, J. Bond. Integrated described video specialist M. Williams. Supervising producer Jennifer Johnson. Produced for AMI by Mountain Road Productions. Copyright 2025 Accessible Media Inc.
An AMI original production.